G'day YouTube, particularly Gary at Inmendham. I've had a look at your 7-minute allegedly final response on SunFoils, and are you serious? What sort of cloud cuckoo land do you live in where you think that anybody is going to dream up a computer to pay attention to whether the car's going up or down a hill so it can beep a bloody siren or flash a light to tell the nut behind the wheel to turn the alternator on because he's going down a hill and now would be an auspicious time? The existing system is set up so that the nut behind the wheel doesn't have to think about it. They know they've got to buy a new battery every 1.5 or 2 years. But other than that, the car starts and it runs. Their standard response is, oh, there's nothing wrong with my car. My car doesn't need anything doing to it. Most of them think their car doesn't burn any fuel to make electricity. They think they only burn fuel to drive the gearbox. Everything that runs off that pulley at the front end of the engine, the engine's already going, mate. It doesn't make any difference, does it? Dear, oh dear, Gary. And as for your theory that it's in the category of the better mousetrap, where if it was that easy, they would have already done it. Well, no, Gary, doesn't work like that. There's one design team that designs the body of the car, and they get told how big the engine is. There's a bloke who designs the engine as a power unit, right? And he gets told where to put the lug that the alternator mounts on. Somebody else designs the electrical system. Somebody else gets told, go and build an alternator that will feed a battery with enough to deal with this sort of a load. And then they cobble it up over a committee meeting. As far as they're concerned, as long as the car doesn't stop with the headlights on at the traffic lights with all the systems running, then they've got it right. At the moment, I think there's an American lawsuit of 90,000 people who are suing Honda because their car never ever achieved the fuel consumption claimed in the advertising. Why is that so? Because the fuel consumption claimed in the advertising is based on the theory that the battery's been on a trickle charger before you go and measure the fuel consumption. And nobody does that. They park the fucking car in the garage or in the street or on the driveway, and the battery slowly works itself down to a position where it stabilises 25 or 35% discharged, so it can suck hard enough on the alternator that it doesn't actually lose condition in the short engine runs. That's what's actually going on. Now, you've harassed me because I'm spending a couple of weeks hand carving the fairing for my son's solar panel. Part 1. This is a one-off prototype. It is not a production model. Yes, I'm explaining to other people how they can make a one-off prototype which will fit their particular car, which will need its own particular size solar panel, and to diagnose what size panel for what car, you're going to have to go and look at a movie called SunFoil Short Talk. Right? And once you've decided whether the car needs a 30-watt panel or a 50-watt panel or a 75-watt panel, then you go and buy the panel, and you're going to buy whatever panel is cheapest, aren't you? And that means that I can't tell you what size frame the panel's going to have, even what proportions it's going to be as a rectangle. It might be a square. So the do-it-yourself crowd who are going to pay attention to this, they are going to build a one-off prototype. And it'll probably be on their car when they sell it, so they might get to build another one. At some stage, when enough YouTubers have put enough do-it-yourself SunFoils onto their car, somebody will decide that although they cannot secure the intellectual property rights to the SunFoil concept, there's enough demand out there that it's a bit like a fucking plastic bucket. You know, if you build a bucket factory, there will be people who want to buy a bucket. The fact that somebody else can build another bucket factory down the road doesn't stop you from wanting a bucket factory of your own. When SunFoils prove they've got a demand like that, that's when you'll be able to buy them in the shops. In the meantime, I've tried drawing the government's attention to it on the theory that surely, maybe, the local university could have a look at it. You know, my Member of Parliament is the Chancellor of the local university. Problem with that. The University of New England at Armidale has no engineering faculty. So Richard Torbay has tried twice to get them to pay attention. The best they'll say on paper, first they tell me that they don't have the facilities to test it and they wish me good luck. So I got Richard to send it to him in his official position, and they took 2 pages to tell Richard the basic principle and hypothesis of the SunFoil project is sound, as any improvement in efficiency of an internal combustion engine will reduce fuel consumption for the same amount of work done. Reducing the engine load needed to drive the alternator will consequently increase the engine efficiency and reduce fuel consumption. The key question is, how much does it reduce fuel consumption, and is the reduction... The key question is, how much does it reduce fuel consumption, and is the reduction sufficient to make the SunFoil project economically viable? And then there's my federal Member of Parliament, Tony Windsor, 15th of April 2010, 5th of November 2010, 25th of May 2011. And Tony Windsor scored a letter from Senator the Honourable Kim Carr, Minister for Innovation, Industry, Science and Research, explaining to him that the CSIRO had looked at it for 5 months after sitting on it for the first 2 months, so 7 months all up, and they couldn't find any bullshit, but they said there are going to be problems getting anybody to commercially develop the idea. Here's the Commonwealth Scientific Industrial Research Organisation's comment. They go on for the first nearly page explaining all the ideas that everybody else is trying to do and why it doesn't work to run a car on sunlight. Not unless it's a special solar racer. Then they get down here, evaluating the benefits of the innovation. Mr. Wharton does not propose to power cars by solar energy. His innovation is simply to use electrical energy to keep the car's battery as fully charged as possible, so that the alternator will not have to generate as much electricity and therefore will not drain as much energy from the engine. If an inexpensive solar collector can be fitted to a car, this seems a reasonable proposition. Mr. Wharton claims to have achieved reduced fuel consumption in the range 10 to 30% from the use of the innovation and provides fuel usage data and trip data over a period of several months. Well, later it was several years, but this is a dated letter. With different versions of his device. The results indicate a high return on the very small investment, indicating that a more comprehensive evaluation could be fruitful. However, there are several reasons why the proposition may not receive the response that Mr. Wharton expects. 1. The nature of Mr. Wharton's innovation invites doubt that the benefits could be reproduced under the full range of vehicle operating conditions. It is well established that driving at 90 km an hour instead of 110 km per hour can yield a fuel saving of between 20 and 25%. The technique known as defensive driving saves fuel. Yes, and that's why I reduced my cruise speed on the highway from 100 k's to 90 k's so I could raise my fuel efficiency from 8 kilometres to the litre to 9.3 kilometres to the litre before I ever put a SunFoil on the car. I'd already done all that. Without doubting Mr. Wharton's claim, a thorough control fuel consumption test over a range of conditions, temperatures, weather conditions and light conditions should be conducted before considering further action. Such testing would be expensive and require the kinds of facilities car makers have. 2. Car makers receive a steady stream of innovations that claim to offer reduced fuel consumption. There is seldom anything that is sufficiently high potential to divert a car maker from its planned program of technology development. Product development programs are expensive and planned in detail, covering several years in advance. Introducing a new device into a test and development program can disrupt an entire program because the new device almost always has to interact with other devices. The purpose of test and evaluation programs is as much to test the interrelationship between components as it is to test components themselves. 3. Almost every global car maker has plans to introduce electric cars or hybrids that can accept electricity from the domestic supply grid. Several car makers have announced their intention to have electric cars on the Australian market by 2012. Better Place is planning to set up recharging stations in 2011. Mr. Wharton's innovation would seem to have greater potential as an aftermarket device. However, to attract interest from this area of the car market, it would be necessary to develop a ready-to-market package because companies that sell to the aftermarket seldom have test and development laboratories to evaluate innovations of the nature of the SunFoil device. In general, CSIRO is not equipped to evaluate inventions, and in particular CSIRO, like the University of New England, does not have facilities that could test Mr. Wharton's claims. Contact Sue Brown. So, I contacted Sue Brown, and she told me that not only did they not have the facilities, they had to pull a bloke out of retirement for the 5 months it took the CSIRO to evaluate the SunFoil, because it is an interface artefact. It squats at the cusp of several intersecting mechanical engineering and scientific disciplines. Right? And there's no one boffin who can pass an opinion on it because it's got too many fingers in too many other people's pies. You know? I'm a non-specialising generalist, Gary. That's just how it works. However, the Minister told me to go and talk to the Cooperative Research Centre for Advanced Automotive Technology. Okay, dear Mr. Windsor, I refer to your letter of 22 December 2010 regarding your constituent Mr. Chris Wharton and his SunFoil project. I also acknowledge receipt of the attached documentation. A preliminary review of Mr. Wharton's documents indicates that he is proposing a retrofit solution, utilising a roof-mounted solar panel as a supplementary energy source for a motor vehicle. While I am not an expert in this technology, a number of issues quickly come to mind. This approach uses two conventional energy technologies, i.e. solar panel and lead-acid battery, in conjunction. Each technology performs its conventional function, and it appears there are no unexpected synergies. I cannot see an inventive step in Mr. Wharton's approach, and believe that it would be very difficult to secure intellectual property protection for the product by way of a patent. This lack of protection would severely limit the business opportunity presented by the technology, as it would be almost impossible to prevent copying of the product. Mr. Wharton has provided significant detail on the technology, but the documents are not marked confidential, and they have not been provided under the terms of a non-disclosure agreement. This approach will further compromise Mr. Wharton's ability to secure intellectual property protection for the product, and the materials presented are not of a sufficiently professional standard to attract the interest of a professional investor or research partner. So, my bit of paper isn't shiny enough. Right? And when I sent photocopies of the lab notes, that wasn't good enough either. And, photocopies of typewritten reports is also not good enough. Right? Me paper's not shiny enough, Gary. Therefore, the idea can't be any good. It might disturb them, you know. My bricks don't fit their moulds. As far as Auto CRC is concerned, our agreed program relates primarily to manufacture of new vehicles and components in Australia, and we have very little to do with retrofits or the aftermarket segment. For these reasons, I have some difficulty in seeing how Auto CRC can materially assist Mr. Wharton with his endeavours. Nevertheless, thank you very much for this referral, and Auto CRC is always willing to assist Australian inventors wherever possible. I am sorry that we have not been able to provide more help on this occasion. I have copied Mr. Wharton on this response and returned his documents to him. Yours sincerely, Dr. Matthew Cuthbertson, Auto CRC. So shit, I thought, maybe I'll get Tony Windsor to send it to the office of the Australian Government Chief Scientist. You know, like, the commercial wankers don't want to know about it, the government research organisation doesn't want to know about it. And behold, the Chief Scientist decided to give me the bureaucratic runaround and send me to the Cooperative Research Centre for Advanced Automotive Technology. So you see, Gary, they don't want to be disturbed. They're happy building cars the way they build cars. They look swoopy, but they're not aerodynamic. And a quarter to sometimes half their fuel burn goes on a never-ending failed effort to kiss and make up to the battery. But they're happy doing it that way, and they don't want to be disturbed. Well, I'm a bloody disturbance, aren't I? I'm telling people all over the world, via YouTube, how they can personally make a one-off, hand-carved, aerodynamically streamlined prototype that will fit their vehicle. And those do-it-yourselfers who are smart enough to pour sand out of a boot with instructions on the heel will save fuel on their vehicle. And if somebody else wants to set up a factory of aftermarket retrofits later on, good luck to them. But mate, you're a very impractical dreamer when it comes to electromechanics and aerodynamics. You really are out of your depth. So pull your head in and take a fool's advice. Fit a SunFoil onto your car. Ciao.